Your brain thinks it's in charge, but your nervous system, your body knows the truth. In my last video, I covered the 5 secrets on how to fail, essentially reverse engineering a poor performer. It was pretty fun, and so I decided to give you the next 6 performance, we'll call them tenets of failure in this series. These are not mindset problems. They are patterns with a physiological imprint and that should be really freaking good news because they aren't you. Now, everybody under pressure breaks down in one of 4 ways. These are not personality traits, as I said. They are patterning embedded in your nervous system, and they source back to like your earliest memories of how you handled discomfort, pressure, belonging, etc. We call these the somatic skins. It is the warrior, the shapeshifter, the asset, and the sage, and you can take a free quiz down below. The link is in the description. You can take that now, you can come back, and you can have your particular pattern in hand as you listen to the rest of this video. All right, so all that to say, the patterns that you operate under, they're not you. They're just the system that you've been adhering to. So if you want a different outcome, then you design a different system. That's what we do over in the Prestige, our Applied Somatic Academy. And so if you're curious, stay to the end and I'll share more. All right, anyways, let's get into it. So discomfort avoidance, hugging the comfort zone. Motivation dependence, needing somebody else or something else to drive you versus intrinsic motivation. Rigidity and tension that you can't drop even if you want to. Or collapse that you just can't seem to harness the structure, the drive needed to go. Most people will call this character flaws, just how I am or how it is. We call them patterned responses. And there's a difference, and it matters because one is something that you're stuck with, like a diagnosis, and the other is something that you can actually work with. So training the human mind and body and expression is what we do best. All right, let's dive in. Failure tenet number 6. Take offense from objective feedback. The world is out to get you, so you better take everything personally. Or you can learn to tell the difference between a real threat and a bruised ego. Because your body will respond to both in the same way. It'll tighten. There will be a heat. For some, an urge to defend. For others, an urge to disappear. That physiological response is not a verdict on feedback. It's a habit. And like all habits, it can be trained. The practitioner who can receive objective feedback without the armor going up is operating with an extraordinary advantage. Not because they're indifferent. In truth, it's the opposite. They are so devoted to growth and being on their leading edge that they have trained that gap between stimulus and response. And that gap is where real development lives. It's worth reflecting on. Where is your own relationship with feedback? Did you have to train it? What did that look like somatically in your body? And likely there was some discomfort, and that brings us into failure tenet number 7. Avoid discomfort at all costs. So often the way that we hold ourselves back from growing beyond what we know can be reduced down to the essentials: opinion and then resistance. The desire and the friction between who you are and where you want to be. Discomfort is the stimulus for change. We might even say pain is the stimulus for change. So without it, you never really have to face reality that you are not where you want to be. There's a delusion in the modern self-help, I would call it shelf-help, industrial complex that says you are enough as you are. And certain branches of self-help have built entire industries around this because it's a really beautiful message that humans love to hear. Now, to be clear, as a human soul, sure, you are enough. You know enough. You have everything you need. But also, when it comes to skill development or orienting around a greater purpose or any domain of mastery or any demonstrable impact in the world, no, you don't know it all. You don't have it all within. And that's a really silly and quite naive premise. I mean, for example, you don't want your surgeon skipping med school or any training because they believed that they had all the answers within. And yet we see this all the time in our circles. In fact, just the other day, I received a comment from someone on socials that said, I'm a lone wolf. I've gone through harm and I've just decided that I have all the answers. I don't need anybody else. And while I certainly honor where they are in their journey, I just thought, wow, how sad to be in a place where you really believe that you can't learn anything from anyone else. There has never been an elite athlete, an innovator, an artist, a practitioner of any consequence who hasn't lived inside that gap between who they are and where they're going. Balance is a great platitude. Having all the answers already and just needing to balance is a great platitude for someone seeking immediate equilibrium. But equilibrium is not where the work gets done. So your body right now knows the difference between the discomfort of real growth and the discomfort of actual harm. And it's worth learning to read that distinction. That's not a mindset skill, that's a somatic literacy skill, and it changes everything. All right, so that brings us to tenet number 8. Wait for motivation before initiating meaningful change. Stephen King, we all know him for the horror writer, right? Said, amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just show up and get to work. I've overseen hundreds of transformations, and I can tell you, motivation is fickle and it's really not to be trusted. It's a bonus when it shows up, but it really only shows up about a third of the time. So I'm always skeptical of the person who walks in on fire for change and they use that as their primary calibration for whether or not they're going to do something. Because I have watched that burn out more times than I can count. The honeymoon phase ends, the excitement wanes, the reality of hard work week after week settles in, and I'm far more optimistic when I see quiet reserve, maybe even fear. That person has no illusions about the road ahead. They just need support navigating it. Action precedes motivation, not the other way around. So motivation that precedes action, it dies the moment the action feels hard. But if you can demonstrate a pattern of showing up to hard things and eventually see the return, motivation will appear and it's far more durable. By the way, you do not have to tangle with this in the mind. We have ways of training this in the body, what we call the psychosoma. In our methodology, we call the substrate embedded in the prestige. It's really damn good. Nobody goes from bad to great, only from good to great. And so the process of becoming good is what generates the potential and then the confidence to become great. Discipline isn't a substitute for motivation. It's actually the engine that produces it. So you have something to take on the road. Here are 3 ways to remove the need for motivation as your catalyst. 1, put skin in the game. Put something of real value on the line. That could be time, money, your word, and make it hurt so that you don't abandon ship. 2nd, choose your environment deliberately. Those with predictable success, they spend time in places where the people around them simply do the thing. This went into the design of the Prestige and every high performance environment that I've ever designed. It allows you to be a part of people who are just doing the thing, not by ground effort, but just as a base standard. So find the room where your goal is unremarkable. And then third, look up. You know this. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But you can hire people too to become more of what you want to become. Read their work. Listen to how they think. Ask them questions, be humble and learn, and then implement and watch what shifts. All right, failure tenet number 9, be rigid in the way that you approach life. As the saying goes, the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. Grit is real. We talked about that earlier. Staying the course through doubt and judgment and the long slog of unsexy work. That matters. It's like the baseline. But there's also a rigidity that wears the costume of inflexible commitment or commitment to principle, and it's different. Real commitment is to the outcome. So flexibility lives in the approach. And your body can show you the difference because there's a quality to genuine determination that feels alive and responsive. And there's a quality to defended rigidity that feels held, braced, locked, like non-open. So auditing your effort to payoff ratio is a practice worth maintaining. The clearer you define it, the clearer it is to catch red flags before small misalignments become expensive ones. I'm going to give you an example actually forged in the woods. One of the things that I learned how to do and then had to execute on was land navigation. This is not with your GPS. This is map, angles, calculations, and here's what was really fascinating. Just the slightest deviation, like a couple degrees, you did your math formula wrong. You forgot to take into account one aspect or one element of land nav. Well, that little deviation at the start, you walk along that direction even a mile or two, and you'll miss the trail, you'll miss your target by a wide margin. It's the same here. So that's what I mean. So when you are fixed on your outcome, you're setting a trajectory way into the future or measurable accomplishment. And then there's times where you are zigzagging, right? And you're being fluid in your approach without compromising on the outcome. You get it. All right. So by the way, if you haven't taken our Somatic Skins Quiz, I mentioned at the beginning, but if you haven't, you might find yourself very fluid, very agile in your life approach, but you might be justifying pivots. And if that's your tendency, you might be operating actually from a shapeshifter nervous system pattern. And you can find out if you're a shapeshifter by taking our Somatic Skins Quiz. Again, link is in the description. Okay, that brings us to failure tenet number 11, multitask. If you want to fail or you want to be a poor performer, multitask. The brain, and by extension, your nervous system, it exhibits in a response selection, a bottleneck when asked to perform several tasks at once. In truth, we are not built for divided attention, and so the perceived experience of multitasking is actually an illusion. What's happening is your task shifting or your attention is moving rapidly between objects, maybe even brain states, and you're spending very little real time with any of them. So repeating concentration to yourself is far less effective than removing those things competing for your attention. So easy peasy, silence your phone. That's not small advice. All right, failure tenet next. Forget what number I'm on. Stop when you're tired. I stop when I'm done. That is one of the most direct performance principles there are. How often do we close the laptop, we leave the conversation, we quit the work just because we feel tired? And the question isn't whether or not fatigue is real. I do hope that you have a performance and a recovery rhythm that can be covered in another time. But the question is, what is your standard for done? Because tired is not done. Tired is information. Done is a different thing entirely. The body has an enormous capacity beyond the first signal to stop. So training that capacity and learning the difference between the first whisper of resistance and actual depletion, well, that's one of the most transferable skills in the mind and body domain, and it shows up everywhere. In short, if you need more energy, build the body to access it. We do that, by the way, in the Prestige, but in the meantime, learn to pause and recover and recenter, because stop and doubt, stopping and starting, it becomes a really nasty habit to break. All right, so there you have it, part 2 on the anatomy, if you will, the architecture of a poor performer. 6 more tenets of failure. And here's what I want to say. Every single one of these, being offended, avoidance, the waiting, the rigidity, the fragmentation of attention, the quitting pattern, every one of them has a felt quality, a texture in the body, and then a meta, a thought explanation about what that sensation feels like. And there is always a moment before the behavior where the pattern announces itself. That's the leverage point that we do best. Behavior level change works on the surface. It's like training wheels. So somatic training, the way that we do it, works at the source. And what I've seen over my own 13 plus years is that when someone trains at the source, the behavior shifts and it holds because the capacity was also built and the identity underneath shifted. This is important because it's not that that person who changed was trying harder, although there is effort and intent. But it's because the pattern, the identity, and the capacity of the system underneath shifted. That's the work of the Prestige. It is our high-touch, somatic trained academy meets underworld culture for skilled practitioners, ambitious creators, and leaders who are ready to train the actual capacity, not just manage the symptoms and talk about concepts. So if you're someone who has been doing the inner work and you're ready for it to produce next level results that match, that is the conversation that I would love to have with you. You can find the link to contact me in the description below. Applications are open for our next season. I've already decided that I want to do a part 3 to this video, and that'll drop probably in a couple days. So we're finishing the list of failure tenets now, and I'm saving the most insidious ones for last. So do smash the subscribe button for the channel so that you don't miss that when it drops. If this landed for you, share in the comments. Also, share it with somebody in your world who needs to see this.